Please consider liking the video and subscribing. Let's begin. With monkeys being a key topic right now, and Walking Dead having a show that felt like it gave life into the franchise, I began to think as I was looking outside my window eating breakfast one morning. Rick Grimes, a leader, a man who is noble and tries his best to protect those he loves, despite the odds. Could he survive the Planet of the Apes? It's random, but not that random. Caesar, the king of the apes, is also a noble leader, an ape that cares so much for his kind, he would do anything to make sure they are safe and free. Two characters that are similar, despite the species difference. I wanted to put out a couple different scenarios and really just see if Rick Grimes could survive the Planet of the Apes. Also for fun, we'll look at if Caesar could survive the Walking Dead. Alright, let's get into this. Okay, so for most of this, it will take place in the Walking Dead universe. Let's say that Rick still wakes up in the hospital, same as in the show, but instead of the walkers taking over the world, it is instead the apes who have risen. Same time frame and everything. In the show, Rick wakes up 59 days after the outbreak. Caesar is taking over some of California, and a lot of humans have gotten sick and died. Once again, in this scenario, they do not rise. Here, Rick doesn't meet any of the other characters like he did in Season 1. He doesn't meet Morgan, Glenn, Daryl, Shane. They have all died because of the sickness. The only experience Rick has, since he won't go to the many different trials and battles, is just the training he received from being a sheriff back when the world was still normal. As Rick collects himself and heads out into the world, he encounters an ape. This can go two ways, since we know that Rick does not attack unless threatened, and we know that apes who follow Caesar also do not attack humans unless they're threatened as well. Rick can be shocked seeing how advanced apes have become and choose to hide from him, or fire at the ape, potentially killing him. Now, we know that chimps are stronger for sure, stronger than a man, especially a man who was in a coma for almost 3 months. That puts Rick at an even more of a disadvantage. In this fight, if the chimp were to get in close range, then I'm sorry to say that Rick would be killed immediately. But if Rick can keep his distance and precisely fire the shots into the chimp, then I think he could easily put it down. For this instance, I'm going to say that Rick was able to shoot all the shots and kill the chimp. With this, Rick now has the impression that all chimps are against humanity, and it's either them or him. Rick must get to the bottom of this and find out more. Since he has no more family, nothing left in Atlanta, he hears of refuge in California. He makes his way to the Golden State. On his way, he sees more places that have fallen and are abandoned. Eventually, after months of travel, he makes it to California, where the base of safe haven he was expecting no longer stands. Rick is then ambushed by multiple apes. They kidnap him and bring them to their base. Rick is then tied up and bagged over his head. When they remove it, he is kneeling before the king himself, Caesar. Caesar sees the fear in Rick's eyes and somewhat anger. Caesar unties Rick, but Rick, seeing this as his only opportunity to attack and be free, attacks Caesar. Ultimately, Rick is treated like any other human and is killed for threatening their king. Here, there wouldn't be enough time for them to talk and come to an understanding, as we'll see later on. That's how I feel that this scenario would go. Let me know down below what you think. Moving on to the next scenario. But what if the ape uprising happened much later in the Walking Dead universe? Along with that, what if the walkers also rose from the dead? Well, let's look at it. As we see that in Season 5 of the show, Caesar has now begun to put together his apes traveling throughout the country, with his platoon of apes who have also tried surviving this new world. He go from California to Washington, D.C. Along the way, he has found a good amount of apes who, because of their higher intelligence, were able to evade and or kill some walkers. In Season 1, Rick was a very different man than who he was in Season 5. In Season 1 of The Walking Dead, Rick was still holding on to those morals of the old world and not embracing the new way of thinking. By Season 5, Rick was a ruthless killer, a man who no longer holds on to those old moral ways of the old world. If you even make a threatening gesture or seem like a threat, Rick would put you down immediately. Compared to the first scenario, this Rick is not afraid of anyone or really anything. This scenario favors more of the humans than it does the apes, because by this time there aren't the same amount of apes in the United States as compared to the early days of the outbreak. But regardless, Caesar has encountered the Saviors, who we all know are not good guys, and their leader is for sure not going to let some apes take over and dethrone him. Caesar and his army decimate the Savior's main outpost. While out for supplies, Rick and the others come across the Savior's outpost, which is now destroyed. A lot of walkers of the Savior's roam. Rick notices that walkers could not have caused this much damage. They put them down with ease, but they find an ape who was left behind. The threatened ape then runs at Rick. Without a doubt, Rick puts a bullet through them. They collect supplies and leave. Caesar returns later and sees that one of his apes was shot in cold blood. He sends out a search party to find if there are any humans left nearby. The apes come across Alexandria. Caesar plans an attack. Him and the apes go through Alexandria, killing human after human. Rick and the others fire at the horde. Most of Rick's crew dies, and Caesar and him face off. He knows this isn't a fight that he's going to win. He shoots at Caesar, giving him a couple injuries. They scrap for a bit, but ultimately, Caesar kills Rick. But before that, Rick stabs Caesar in one of his eyes, blinding him. Yes, this scenario is kind of dark, but because by this time, Rick is a murderer. I mean, he's still the good guy. He's just harder to reason with. He just cares about protecting his group. A lot of miscommunication and fighting before coming to reason is what causes both of our heroes to fall out. So we know what would happen if Rick was first introduced to apes in Season 1 and in Season 5, but what about in the middle? What about that time smack dab in the middle, before Rick turned into a ruthless killer but wasn't totally naive to the world? And this situation takes place during Season 4, while Rick and the rest of the group lived at the prison, an iconic location in the TWD universe. There is no governor in this scenario. Caesar and his apes have taken over California. Since Atlanta is some distance, our group has not caught wind of this. Over time, there are less and less walkers around. Our group has decided to settle down in this prison, with no one threatening them. Why leave? Eventually, though, Caesar wants to keep expanding to the rest of the United States. In this particular expedition, he joins the apes in traveling to the south. The apes and Caesar come across Rick and their group. At first, obviously, Rick is very confused, but comes to understand Caesar. Since Caesar can speak and portray his emotions, he says that he does not wish harm to them, and even goes as far as to invite them to their base for a better place to live. Rick is hesitant at first, but wanting to understand the apes more, he accepts, and him and the whole group follow Caesar to California. Caesar and Rick talk more and more, and they see that they aren't different. They both care about their people and their loved ones. After 3 long months of travel, they finally make it to California. Sadly, on the journey, Rick has lost his entire group due to the simian flu. Deep down, Rick is so regretful. He feels bad. Should he have left the prison? Caesar then offers him a place to live. He promises him that they will avenge his friends and the rest of the world, so that finally, man and ape can live side by side. Rick agrees to join him, being the only human at the ape compound. Unlike the other scenarios, I think Rick and Caesar would definitely get along if they just talked. Now, what if Rick was just entirely plopped into the universe of the Planet of the Apes and not in the TWD universe? I think that he would be able to survive. Now, obviously, Rick would put down a couple of apes because we know that he's a survivor. It comes down to what version of Rick. Like I said, in later seasons of the show, for example, in Season 8, Rick defeats Negan and then states this entire speech, stating how humanity versus the dead is the only war that should matter. With Rick being in the Planet of the Apes, he would come to understand that the true enemy is humanity. All the apes want to be free and live with humans, but humanity just cannot accept that. He would seek out the apes and humbly ask to join them. Once again, Caesar would recognize that he's not an evil man, and his skills would certainly help them win the war against humans. I feel like the only real threat is the other apes who just hate all humans no matter what, like Koba, an ape who has so much hatred against humans because of the horrible things they did to him. I feel like that would ruin the relationship between Rick and Caesar. Somehow, Koba would either frame Rick or just kill him entirely. But what if we flip the script? Now, what if Caesar is in the main focus of The Walking Dead? Caesar, now the new king of the apes, has liberated a couple hundred of them. It's only about 3 months after the events of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The simian flu is not only killing humans, but there's another virus, the wildfire virus, a virus that brings the dead back to life. With humanity's population rapidly falling, Caesar realizes that the Mirror Woods, a very safe place for the apes, is now their new haven. Now, with a couple thousand apes, they begin to form their own little community. But despite Caesar having thousands of apes, there are still millions upon millions of walkers all across America and even more all around the world. If somehow the walkers wandered into the woods and started to go after the apes, I truly believe that Caesar would be smart enough to understand that those are no longer humans, and that the only best way to kill them is by stabbing them in the head. The community Caesar would build would be only on the trees, and they would only go to the ground if they absolutely had to. Some time would go by, and eventually, the ape army would grow even more, and Caesar would need to make the journey to the oasis, an area that is surrounded by beautiful mountains and away from society. This would be the hardest journey, as a lot of apes would die due to hunger or walker encounters. Finally, the apes make it to the oasis, and Caesar can rest, building his hidden society of apes in a dead world. The only peace is with them. Finally, coming to the last scenario here, we have scenario 5, the best possible ending for both sides in my opinion, and it's also the coolest. Same day, both outbreaks occur. Rick never falls into a coma. He is awake and is fully aware of everything going on, the news covering both major events, the walkers and the rise of the apes. Because of the 2 viruses, they end up evolving and fusing. Not only are the walkers and humans turning, but now apes have also turned. Rick's family in this scenario still dies due to the simian fire flu, which is what I'm calling this evolved virus. Rick, who now has nothing left to live for, is about to end his own life, but an extremely early version of the CRM stops Rick from killing himself, and they offer him a safe place to live, a reason to keep going on. He agrees, as Rick is seen to have major potential. Some time goes on, and Rick is on a liberation mission to stop at this time what is perceived as evil, sick apes, not knowing that they're also just trying to survive and be free as well. On this mission, apes attack Rick's squad. They are all killed except for him. He always wondered if the apes were actually as much a threat as walkers. The apes do not kill Rick. Caesar sees Rick's even greater potential, and he explains to him the bigger mission. Since walker apes exist and normal walkers exist, the 2 should join forces and try to find a cure to protect the others. Rick agrees. He joins Caesar as the two build a community that is open to everyone. Eventually, Rick and Caesar find ways to reach out to the rest of the world. Many years go by, and it would seem that most of the United States is free from the dead. Apes and humans now live side by side. Rick and Caesar are praised and are seen as prophets due to them working together and saving the world. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions for other videos like this you want to see me do in the future, please let me know. Also, I want to know, how would you think Rick would survive in the Planet of the Apes or Caesar would survive in The Walking Dead? I'm really curious. Also, I just want to say thank you so much for the recent support on my channel. The amount of subscribers you have gained in such a short time is so freaking cool. So thank you so much for that. Please take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.